Welcome to all of you for this episode of Dynamics Chat Show. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures. Indeed, this is truer than true in times that we are into currently. Following the global trend of embracing virtual way of doing business, the AWS reInvent 2020 also kickstarted virtually yesterday. An unbelievably high number, about 500,000 people have globally registered to take part in this 3-day extravaganza. As a matter of fact, globally, the developers, technology consumers, service providers, ISVs, and many other tech communities actually wait for AWS reInvent when the company announces a slew of new products and also the enhancements to the existing ones. Andy Jassy, CEO of Amazon Web Services, took the stage, which is much awaited, mesmerizing keynote that touched upon the issue of invention and reinvention in a very different form this year. Constant reinvention is the key to build a long-term sustainable business, and organizations should be reinventing while they are healthy and developing products and services that solve customer problems and not for their coolness factor. That's what he said yesterday. He also mentioned that one wants to be reinventing all the times. Some of it is in the right reinvention culture, and some of it is about knowing what technology is available to you and jumping onto it to make the reinvention happen. A big takeaway from Jesse's keynote was that digital transformation is not just about technology, but also about leadership. Also, highlighting AWS's performance, and he said that while it took the company just more than 10 years to grow to a $10 billion business, it just took 23 months to get to 20 billion, 13 months to move to 30 billion, and just 12 months, just 1 year to get to 40 billion. So that's a matter of pride for AWS, most certainly. So today we have Scott Mullins, Managing Director of Worldwide Financial Services Business and Market Development for AWS. Scott is with us today. Scott is responsible for leading the development and execution of AWS's strategic initiatives in the financial sector services industry around the world. Welcome, Scott. Welcome to this chat show with Dynamics CISO.
Rahul, thank you for the warm welcome, and it's great to be with you again.
Thank you. So let's begin our conversation, in a little informal way, and then we will come to some very subtle questions that I have for you. So the unprecedented challenge that the world began to confront since the beginning of this year has actually witnessed disruption of a very different order, of a very different kind. And it is directly impacting how financial services are delivered today to the consumers. How do you assess the situation, especially in the financial services sector, fintechs, etc.?
Well, look, it's no argument that these are unprecedented times, at least in our lifetime. And I think, if I were to sum up what happened as COVID hit around the world, and it hit at different times in the late winter, early spring, in different parts of the world, I would summarize that by saying many organizations went from talking about their strategy for digital transformation over time, and many organizations had that PowerPoint deck or somebody who was responsible for envisioning that, to very quickly, and in some cases overnight, talking about, forget the digital strategy, what are our digital capabilities today? What can I do tomorrow? And that took many different forms, but it kind of coalesced around a couple of ideas. Number one, how do I make sure that those people that make financial services can work? How do I get my teams the ability to actually continue to do what they do? Second thing was, how do I make sure that the systems that make the industry work in these unprecedented times? And then related to that is, how do I actually make sure that the systems that have to scale can do that? And what we found at AWS is that we were very involved immediately in helping our customers do that. And from the standpoint of helping those who make financial services work and actually be able to access the systems they need, we saw immediate deployments of things like our Amazon Workspaces, which is our desktop as a service. Because if you can't come into the office anymore, the office has to come to you. Very similarly, we saw organizations also using our call center as a service, Amazon Connect, because if you cannot come into the physical building that your call center is located in, then the call center technology has to come to you. And we saw many financial institutions leaning into Connect as a way to actually be able to interact with their customers. On the system side, we were able to actually help many organizations around the world support mission critical systems and scale those up in relation to unprecedented market volumes in the capital market space. In the US specifically, we had a lending program called the PPP that we were able to help many financial institutions scale to get funding to small businesses as they looked to ensure that their businesses could operate. And so very unprecedented times that called for some ingenuity on the parts of businesses, the ability to go digital relatively immediately. And we're happy to say that we were able to help people do that.
Excellent. World over, the financial institutions, all this while in the past 6-7 months have been focused on safety, security, resiliency, scalability, and also the growth. This, in a way, puts a great deal of stress on the financial sector companies and services organizations from a technology perspective. So how do companies enhance the digital engagement with the extraordinary volume and volatility that both of them are challenging the global marketplaces?
It's a good question. I think when you think about those parameters or those care points that you mentioned, scalability, security, growth, those are constants for financial institutions. And also throw in regulatory compliance and making sure that you're meeting all of your obligations in that space. Those are constants in the industry. Those didn't pop up new in relation to the pandemic. Now, I would add to that, those also became even more important when we began to be limited in the ways that we conducted our businesses. And so I think to the question about in these unprecedented times and the pressures and the volumes, what we've seen many organizations do is to be really ingenuitive and to be scrappy. And the constraints that have been put on many businesses, those businesses that have leaned into modern tooling and modern technology, which is what the cloud really represents, those businesses were able to be nimble and responsive. I mentioned in some cases where organizations were able to really quickly change from physical call centers to virtual call centers using Amazon Connect. That's a big change. Actually moving from having people come into a building, sit at a desk every day in rows of cubicles versus logging in from your own laptop at home and doing your function. That could be a big change, but if you've leveraged the use of a service like Connect, you're able to do that in a relatively quick manner and then scale it to thousands of agents in a very short period of time. You can look at volumes, and specifically when you look at volumes in the capital market space, if you've not yet scaled those systems that process that information, then you're going to have peak capacity and you only be able to process what you're able to do. You can look at our customer NASDAQ, for example. NASDAQ had actually just completed a case study with us, and we're very fortunate to have them as a reference customer before COVID hit. And they were talking about their move of the back-end processing for NASDAQ's exchanges to a data lake on AWS. They've been using AWS for many years for that, using our petabyte scale data warehouse as a service called Redshift for that, and then building a data lake as well. And they were talking about the billions of rows of transactions that they process on a nightly basis. Well, that billions of rows of transactions, which was a very large number, that actually no longer was the high watermark when COVID hit. And they were talking to us about how, as they looked at the systems that they have built and deployed on AWS to support the exchanges, the performance of that system during unprecedented market volumes has not been a concern for them at all. It's actually scaled to help them meet the demands in their business. We've seen that over and over again from the standpoint of those who've leaned into modern tools. When again, that's what the cloud represents. They've had the ability to simply dial up the appropriate level of scaling that they need in their businesses.
Excellent example that you gave of NASDAQ. I think most of the organizations have to imitate such practices to be prepared for any kind of eventuality. I mean, this was very unprecedented, but anything can happen. So how do you think can the BFSI sector companies using the wide range of cloud technologies enable things like remote workforce? How can they foster better collaboration? How can they achieve agile development and also ensure business continuity in the face of complexity and restrictions?
Yeah. Well, I've mentioned some of those tools already, especially for remote work. I mentioned Amazon Workspaces, which is our desktop as a service offering. Many organizations were already using Workspaces before COVID, and then as COVID hit and organizations needed a way to actually be able to enable their workers, Workspaces was something that we definitely saw organizations turning to. I mentioned Connect, and Connect is remarkable on a number of fronts. Number one, it's a pay-as-you-go contact center, meaning when the call comes in, that's when the organizations begin paying for that. And it's also easily configurable and scalable. It's not something that takes a long time to set up, which is a benefit when you need to move quickly and enable people to work remotely and still make contact with customers. And then if you look at the ability to actually continue to touch customers, you saw more and more use of our AI services and being able to actually enhance digital user engagement with customers, whether that's being able to actually use Amazon Lex and Poly to build really engaging chatbots, whether that's the use of Transcribe, another one of our AI services, to look at loan documentation. I mentioned many organizations here in the US specifically were participating in the Small Business Administration's PPP program, that lending program. You could look at Cabbage. Cabbage is a great example of a fintech startup that used our AI services to actually enable the processing of loans through that program and to speed up that process for their customers. And so you saw many organizations leaning into those technologies to enable remote work and to also enable the continued touch and help for customers.
So Scott, did you also notice that all of these existing financial sector customers that AWS has, did they come to you? Did they work with you even more intrinsically during this time of COVID?
Well, the fortunate thing is that we have very good partnerships across the industry with solution providers and also directly with financial institutions. And so where we've had those relationships, we did see organizations say, look, this is an unprecedented time and I need that partnership. And we've been able to work with organizations around the world to scale and meet the demands that they're seeing on their applications and for their services, for sure. And then you had organizations also that said, listen, we've started a relationship. We may not be as far down the road. We've still got some on-premise things, but we've got some work in the cloud and we've got some experience and we've got some skill sets, but we need your help as well. And we've been able to help there too. There wasn't a have and have nots moment necessarily. It wasn't as if we couldn't take on and help more people and more financial institutions in that situation. The cloud is a toolkit. And we're happy to help organizations around the world, whether it's a fintech startup just getting started, or it's the largest organizations in the world, from global banks to global insurers to exchange operating companies or payments platforms, to leverage those services. And we'll be able to do that not only throughout this pandemic, but throughout the time that I've been here at AWS. That's almost 7 years now.
Great. A few more questions before we wind up our conversation. The institutions, financial institutions especially, will have to roll out services using digital and only digital channels while preserving the most human experience possible. So how do you think AWS will take part or take charge of such a situation with its wide-ranging product suites that it already has and has announced in the recent reInvent?
Well, I don't I don't think you would ever see us take charge of that. That, financial institutions do what financial institutions do, and then AWS does what AWS does. We will definitely take part. And if you look at the way that we look at the roadmap for our services, 90% of our roadmap for our services is based on inbound requests from our customers, and our customers are financial institutions or any other institution that's using our services across any industry. And the other 10% of our roadmap, by the way, is us kind of looking at that incoming traffic from our customers saying, hey, this would be a great thing to add, or this would be a great service, and then trying to guess ahead so we can be a little bit ahead of those requests. So what you have heard Andy say in the keynote, and you mentioned it earlier, Rahul, thanks for doing that, is look, we listen to customers constantly. And as he announced every new feature or new function or new service, he said, listen, we've heard from customers this thing, and that's why we've created this thing in response. And so you'll see us continue to do that. That we really value that feedback loop that we have with our customers. In fact, if you look at many of the features that we've added over the years, beginning probably in 2016 is a great example. Goldman Sachs came out on stage, Roy Joseph from Goldman Sachs, and said, hey, look, we've been working with AWS specifically in the area of encryption. We wanted to make sure that as Goldman made a move to the cloud, that we had comfort that the encryption was what we wanted it to be. And Roy talked about that and their work with us on what we call our key management system, or KMS. And then even last year, David Solomon, their CEO at Goldman Sachs, not only did he DJ reInvent, which is really cool because he's also a DJ, but he also came out and said, hey, look, we've been working with AWS for a number of years, and we've been working with them on adding features and functionality that help Goldman Sachs. And in the process, we've also been building new businesses on AWS. He mentioned Marcus, their digital bank, their retail bank they launched in the UK, that runs on AWS. And he also said, hey, that same technology powers the Apple Card because Goldman is the back end of the Apple Card too. And then even more recently, they talked about their transaction banking service that they're not only using themselves, but offering out to other institutions. And so I think we'll continue to see that happen. Us listening to what our financial services customers need from the standpoint of our services, both features and functionality, and then brand new services if they ask for that. And then also us planning a little bit ahead from a technology perspective to make sure that we're meeting those needs.
Great. So lastly, it's also a time in terms of budgetary constraints when companies would like to optimize their current IT and application infrastructure and try to make the most efficient use of the existing resources. How do you think, Scott, cloud can be the possible way of going forward in terms of renovating their entire IT infrastructure and also kind of saving their existing investments?
Well, there's the basics, right? So you look at what the cloud represents, and its elasticity and scalability at the very core. That's not necessarily how on-premises infrastructure works. You have to plan for your peak, and you own it. You've capitalized it, you've built a data center, you've put gear into that data center, you've racked, you've stacked, you've powered it, and now you're maintaining it, and you're probably depreciating it over a lifetime. Or you might have a relationship with a co-location provider, or you might have a relationship with a solution provider who then provides you a managed service. That stuff is always on. You're paying for that constantly, and you might be paying for it over time. When you move to the cloud, you, number one, get elasticity and scalability, meaning if you need to add capacity from the standpoint of processing volumes, like the instance in the example of NASDAQ, you add that capacity. When you don't need that capacity anymore, you actually reduce that capacity and you don't pay for that capacity. So there's a cost saving there. You could also look at what the cloud represents and then the advancements that AWS is bringing out in relation to our services, because as we improve our services, we also continue to reduce the cost or the price of those services to the benefit of our customers. Great example of that's the Graviton2 chip set. Graviton2 represents 40% cost savings on compute, 40% cost savings on compute. We continue to lower prices over time as we improve our services for the benefit of our customers, because we want to make sure that they're receiving all the benefits of the cloud. And then last but certainly not least, and I don't think this gets considered a lot, or as much as it probably should, when we talk about this, and often it's in the financial services industry, um, we can actually turn things off when we're not using them in the cloud. A great example would be development environments. And so if you're a CIO out there, I would encourage you to think about all the development environments that you have that you're running, and do you shut them down at night? When your developers leave for the evening, or whenever they stop work for the day, do those environments shut down, or are they left running? And all the resources that are behind them, are they still running? That's also immediate cost savings, because you have the ability to stand those things up and then stand them down and then stand them back up as a means for cost savings. We also at AWS are very focused on cost savings and optimizing spend for our customers. Not only do we have tools that run in the background for our customers if they choose to do that. That tool is called Trusted Advisor, and Trusted Advisor has saved hundreds of millions of dollars for customers now since its inception. We also have dedicated folks here at AWS whose sole function is to look at the way our customers are using our services and to help them understand how to optimize the use of those services from a spend perspective. So it's a really compelling proposition, Rahul, when you look at the cloud from the standpoint of, if you need to dial in some cost savings into your business. I know that many organizations are looking at that today. Being able to actually leverage the cloud to run applications and to run business use cases is a way to do that.
So one last quick point that I want you to summarize for us. How do you visualize the emergence of the future, as we are calling it the next normal? And if we look at the announcements of AWS reInvent 2020, what can the financial sector companies expect from the product portfolio and services portfolio of AWS?
Yeah, I think if you want to talk about the new normal, and that's a common phrase. We first have to talk about the old normal, or what we're coming from. And Andy had a graphic in his keynote that talked about IT spend across the world and across industries, and about 4% of IT spend is in the cloud today. 96% is on-premise. It's spent in an on-premise data center. And so that's a good kind of baseline starting point to think about where we are. Now, I think the direction of travel for the financial services industry, and actually other industries, is that, look, the cloud represents modern information technology and modern tools to actually build and run and power applications. And so I think that the direction of travel is set. I think that, as Andy said, in the fullness of time, you're going to see most organizations either not have a physical data center of their own, an on-premise data center, or they'll have a very small footprint based on their own unique needs. I think you're going to see the majority of workloads moving to the cloud. That also means that as we look at kind of that new normal, or where we are today and where we'll be for a period of time, there's going to be a very high interest in hybrid architectures, and actually in also looking at how we architect things and how we actually adopt new architectural practices. And you saw Andy talk about specifically our view of hybrid and being able to bring AWS to wherever our customers need it. And we talked about the different instances of Outposts that we're offering now, and local zones, and where we're adding those local zones. I think it's important to note that when you look at what customers want, they want to be able to leverage new technologies. They want to be able to leverage things that actually get them closer to customers faster. That's not necessarily what legacy technologies do. And so I think, our goal is to make sure that we can bring those tools to our customers and not necessarily have to bring them to an AWS region. You'll see us continue to do more of that as well. And I think you're also going to see us continue as we go forward to make machine learning that much easier for regular people. You don't have to be a data scientist to actually leverage machine learning. And you can look at all the additions that we are making to SageMaker, which is our machine learning platform, and those additions making it easier for normal folks to actually begin to leverage machine learning in a meaningful way. I think you'll see us continue to make investments there as well.
Excellent. So it was that's all I had to discuss about. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate your candid conversation with us.
Rahul, thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure to see you virtually this year. Next year, we'll hope for an in-person meeting again. And thanks again for the conversation today.
Thank you very much. Have a very nice day.